Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Susan. So yes, it's a great joy for me to be back teaching for Ollie again. Most of my courses have been more we would call music history or music appreciation on a particular composer or a particular genre of music. This has a different focus, and it's something I've been wanting to do for a long time, in a sense, looking at a very interesting interaction of music and culture, you could say, which is these issues of music and gender. In fact, my subtitle is It's Music and Gender, a Wonderfully Tangled Web, which it is. And I hope you will enjoy the tangledness of this. So we have a number of topics. The first we're going to cover is, I think one of the things that's interesting in history is when the status quo is interrupted or overturned. Western, and I should say I'm really talking about Western, European based classical music here, which has been overwhelmingly dominated by men, male composers, male performers, particularly composers. But we're going to talk about women composers, when, why, and how. Where have there been moments in history, starting in the Middle Ages, when women have flourished as composers? Sometimes they were nuns, sometimes they were connected to a male composer. What are the circumstances that has caused this? How was their music perceived? Was it viewed differently because they were women? So that's the first class. The second one is to do with the gender association of different musical instruments and how those things have changed throughout time. For example, in the 20th century, we think of the harp as an overwhelmingly women's instrument. However, before the 19th century, it was absolutely a male instrument in the Celtic world. We'll talk about Vivaldi's all-women orchestra in Venice in the 18th century, and what an oddity, in a sense, this was, and how the women could not be looked at playing instruments. They had to be behind a screen. The social roles of music and gender and instruments, women playing an instrument to show their accomplishments and their marriageability. We'll talk a little bit about music in Jane Austen's novels in this regard. Then the third section is the anxiety of music and masculinity. And I have the quote, is he, quote unquote, musical? Because in the 19th century in England, that was a metaphor for asking if someone was a homosexual, if a man was musical. So there's a whole interesting thing around this, and this goes way about anxiety about, well, can you be a real man and play or compose music? So, and there's writings, and we're going to look at cultural contexts, some YouTube's tropes. This is used in advertising sometimes. If you're driving a Ford truck, you don't want to be caught listening to classical music. So that I think will be an interesting class. Week 4 is going to be on the whole issue of women conductors. This has been one of the last true bastions of sexism in classical music. Why have it taken so long for women to assume the podiums of the great orchestras, as they are now starting to do? What is it about conducting, the image of the conductor, that's so specifically thought of as male? And so that will be something we'll explore. The last 2 sessions we're going to devote to the wonderful, speaking of tangled web, of gender, opera, and the human voice. If you go back into this 18th, 16th through the 18th centuries, of course, young boys were castrated, so they were singing the heroic male parts in high voices. You had women who specialized in performing male roles in opera. You have innumerable cases of gender disguise in the context of plot devices in opera. The whole notion of a female mezzo-soprano as opposed to a countertenor, which is a man singing in his falsetto range. They may be singing the same music. What's the difference? What's the feel? What's the affect of this? And in our last session, we are very privileged to have a guest speaker who is my friend Elliot Franks, who is a female to male transgendered opera singer. and he will have a very unique perspective to share on a lot of what we've talked about in this class. So we will be listening, a lot of, if you've been to my classes before, we listen to a lot of music, which we will continue to do, but we'll also have a lot of lively discussion, which I know you are all very good at here at Ollie, which is why I love teaching here. As I say, a number of video presentations, and as I say, a lot of music, and a lot of interesting ideas, I hope, bouncing around. So, as I always say, come, listen, learn, and join in the adventure. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Excellent.